I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Anderson.
Here.
Director Buchanan. Here. Director Colson. Here. Director DeWitt. Here. Director Lewis.
Here.
Director Troiani.
Here.
Director McGallis.
Here.
We have a quorum of 7 present with no absent. If the record would also show that Directors Durante, Frega, Fuentes, Hobson, Melvin, Pang, Ross, Cotton, and Chairman Dillard are all also present.
Thank you. Item number 2 is approval of the minutes for the meeting held on May 19, 2016. Are there any questions or comments? If not, could we have a motion to approve? Motion by Director Lewis, second by Director Buchanan. Roll call.
Director Anderson.
Yes.
Director Buchanan.
Yes.
Director Colson.
Yes.
Director DeWitt.
Yes.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Troiani.
Yes.
Director McGallis.
Aye.
7 ayes.
Thank you. Item 3A is a report on the monthly financial results for April 2016. B.
Today we will review the year-to-date financial results through April. And generally, favorable expense results continue to more than offset the unfavorable operating revenue. A little background, about 15,000 jobs were added in the Chicago area in April, but the regional labor force increased by about 25,000, resulting in an increase in the regional unemployment rate to 6.5%, while the national held steady at 5%. Let's look at ridership. Current year-to-date system ridership is 2.4% lower than budget and continues to be the main area of concern, as shown by the orange bars on the chart. April ridership decreased by 4.7% versus prior year. The loss of a weekday accounts for about 2 points of this year-over-year decline. For the year, RTA system ridership is now down about 1.2% from 2015. Returning to the ridership summary, all of the service boards continue to see ridership results below budgeted levels. Unfavorable ridership variances range from 1.2% for Metra to 2.7% for CTA, where bus ridership was 4.5% unfavorable and rail ridership was 0.4% unfavorable. CTA ridership, though, was still higher than prior year by 2%. The average price of gas was $2.36 per gallon in April compared to $2.80 per gallon a year ago. This was the lowest April gas price since 2009. When we look at operating revenue, it was $1.3 million or 0.4% unfavorable to budget, primarily due to the lower level of state reduced fare reimbursement being accrued by the service boards. Looking at Pace Suburban Service operating revenue, that was 10.3% unfavorable, highlighted in red, due to the shortfall in reduced fare reimbursement, and it's compounded by lower than budgeted fare revenue and advertising income. ADA Paratransit was 10.4 unfavorable due to the timing of Medicaid reimbursements. Looking at the public funding section of the dashboard, we see mixed results, with CTA favorable to budget, highlighted in the light blue due to the very strong real estate transfer tax receipts, while Metro and Pace Suburban Service are lower than budget due to the slightly unfavorable sales tax and PTF. And while that may sound a little inconsistent, that's because of the sourcing of the sales tax. The sales tax is coming in stronger in the city than it is in some of the outer counties. And as you know, depending on the sourcing, that's where the percentage is drawn. We are including here actual sales tax results for March 2016, which grew 2.1% over March 2015. Looking at the last 6 months, sales tax growth has slowed a bit to around 2.5%, something we are watching very closely with the service board CFOs, especially as we look at 2017 sales tax projections. System-wide operating expenses through April were $25.5 million or 2.9% favorable to budget, with each service board reporting favorable results for both the month of April and year-to-date. As we have reported previously, more than 1/3 of this favorable variance is attributed to lower fuel prices. Pace Suburban Service had an 11.4 favorable to budget expense performance, highlighted in light blue, due primarily to the fuel savings of $3 million. Pace also had significant favorable variance in their operations and administration category. ADA paratransit, 9.8% favorable expense performance, is being driven by the lower fuel prices, the purchase transportation, and administrative expense. PACE continues to realize lower ADA paratransit trip costs due to improved terms with their recent service provider contracts. Looking at the regional level, favorable operating expenses and public funding more than offset the unfavorable operating revenue, producing a year-to-date result which was $34.3 million favorable to budget, a $3 million improvement over last month's report. When you look at Metro, PACE, Suburban Service, and ADA Paratransit, each have favorable net result variances in excess of 3%, highlighted in light blue, due primarily to good expense performance. Now let's look at the recovery ratios. Each was favorable to budget through April. The fare revenue recovery ratio of 35.8 includes passenger fare revenue only, and that's what we consider the pure recovery ratio. When ancillary service board revenue is included, the recovery ratio increases to 41.9% through April, and that includes all other revenue like concessions and lease space and so forth. So that's also slightly improved from last month. In the right section, we show the statutory recovery ratio, labeled with credits, and compared to budget. This also improved from prior month and stood at 48.7% through April, 1.1 percentage points favorable to budget, due again primarily to the favorable expense reported by each service board. But I do want to talk about that. While it is currently favorable to budget, we really want to monitor this very carefully during the year due to the uncertainty with the state reduced fare reimbursement, which impacts operating revenue. A favorable expense performance has to continue throughout 2016 to counteract any potential loss of the RFR. In summary, we can again conclude that expenses continue to perform well, while operating revenue and ridership remain below budgeted levels. Are there any questions? That concludes my remarks.
Any questions or comments? Thank you very much, B, for that report.
Okay, thank you.
Item 3B is a semi-annual report on project management oversight. And B, I believe Violet is going to make the presentation.
I'd like to introduce Violet Gunka. She will be presenting the project management report. Jim Hickey, who usually presents the report, has transferred to IDOT. He's no longer with the agency. But Violet is the project manager. She's also been responsible for the rail safety program oversight for the last, 10 years or something like that. So Violet, if you could please take us through the report. Thank you.
Just testing. It's on. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning.
Morning.
Today I'm happy to present the current report on project management oversight. We last presented on PMO in December 2015. You received the PMO report as part of your board briefing, and it includes details for every project. The report was designed to make it straightforward for our board to easily see progress, issues, and risks for the transit capital projects in the region. The program currently includes oversight of all state-funded transit projects, regardless of budget, and all other projects with budgets of $10 million or more, regardless of funding source. Together, this set of projects for the current reporting period represents $3.5 billion. Please note that the 2015 and 2016 capital programs do not include any state funding, so the state-funded projects in this report are part of prior year's programs. As a bit of a background, RTA implements the PMO program pursuant to Section 2.01B of the RTA Act. RTA is required to oversee the Service Board's capital programs and expenditures. PMO is part of RTA's fulfillment of this requirement. Specific involvement includes direct reports and meetings from Service Board's project teams, attendance at other project meetings, project site visits, and periodic reporting to the Illinois Department of Transportation. RTA PMO staff is augmented by engineering and project management consultants who provide necessary expertise as well as additional staff power. The contracts for these services were approved by the board in April 2016. As of the current reporting period, all projects are either on budget or under budget. Details are included in the PMO report. If project delays caused solely by the lack of state state funding are excluded, schedule performance is strong with 90% of projects on schedule. Only 2 are behind schedule. Details are also included in the PMO report. However, if we include uncertainty in state capital funding as a cause of project delay, 8 more projects are behind schedule, making for half of our state-funded projects to have fallen behind. This represents the true status of transit capital projects in the region. The change order amounts represent cumulative totals for the currently ongoing projects, and 80% of the region's projects are without change orders. The vast majority of extra cost for change orders has been for added value to the project. Selected project highlights include CTA's project to improve 5 stations on the O'Hare branch, which remains on schedule and within budget. Metro is nearing completion of the rehabilitation of 176 commuter rail cars originally supplied by Amarail between 1994 and 1998. All work has been performed in-house by Metro forces. PACE continues to successfully procure vanpole vehicles. As with other types, vanpole vehicles are procured as funding becomes available. To date, 70 have been ordered. This concludes my presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Violet. As in the past, I think even last year, we started seeing projects become off schedule because of the lack of funding certainties, and certainly this project, this year review of most recent last year projects, we're heading for, 50% of them not being able to be completed on time. So it's a real concern that we get the state funding that we need. It shows the impact on our projects right here today. Any questions or yes, Director?
A quick question. Even though the budget constraints are creating problems, are any of those delays significant enough that continued problems with state funding could cause some mothballing of some of these ongoing projects, or basically stalling them?
What our understanding is, and the state did say to us that they were committed to honoring all of those projects that they had funded, but any project that had not been started is on hold.
Okay.
So some are shelved for the moment. We can't say they're permanently shelved, but some have not been started at all, so yes.
And are some of the ongoing projects at risk of being?
Some of the ongoing projects were delayed, like purchase of rolling stock and so forth. We have a list of the projects that have been delayed due to state funding, and I could give you those. It's the Metro Auburn Park Station, the Metro Hazel Crest Station, the Metro Peterson Ridge Station, Metro Union Pacific West Line expansion. PACE has the purchase of the CNG buses, the purchase of paratransit vehicles, the Toyota Park Transportation Center, and the Joliet bus improvements. Those are the projects that have been delayed. Those are the 8 projects that are on hold, suspended, or in various phases waiting for state funding.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Director Hobson?
Are any of these delays in state funding likely to cause budget overruns in terms of increased costs of non-acquired materials or labor costs or anything related to that to drive the expected budgeted numbers up?
That is certainly a possibility. We'd have to, look at it project specific, but obviously if projects were quoted at an amount 2 years ago, and if it's delayed 2 years, those numbers would change. Some of those responses or RFP responses are only good for so long, so we have heard that. It'd have to be looked at as a project specific, by case.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, thank you very much, Violet.
Thank you.
Item 4A is an ordinance authorizing the quarterly capital amendment for the second quarter 2016. Jill?
Good morning. We have a short amendment to the capital program for your consideration today. PACE has submitted a request to amend its capital program with $1.5 million in additional funds available from prior year operating positive budget variances. These funds will be used to undertake a new project at the Rosemont Transit Center. Funds will be used for design, engineering, and construction improvements that include curb and gutter, ADA access and pavement improvements, sidewalk replacement, and new signing and stripping of the transit center. These improvements will accommodate expanded PACE I-90 corridor service. The changes are included in the capital program schedules included with the ordinance you received with your materials. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. These are housekeeping items, basically, for the budget. Any
Yes.
questions or comments? If not, we have a motion to approve. Motion by Director Karani, second by Director Lewis. Could we have Lee for the last unanimous roll call?
7 ayes.
Thank you. Item 4B, ordinance modifying and restating the RTA interest rate risk management policy. B.
So, as you may recall, Mike, as you may recall, last fall, we met with you and presented the strategic financial plan. There were 3 components: fund balance review, our short-term policy, protocol and borrowing, and a review of our swap portfolio. So the other 2 items we continue to work through. As you know, we've come to you on the various aspects of the short-term borrowing. So this was the 3rd component. And what we were advised to do by our advisor that we brought in, that was Sycamore, was to look at and swap, a swap advisor as well. We were asked to update our existing swap policy to make sure it is Dodd-Frank compliant. The Dodd-Frank ordinance, as we're talking about here, was adopted so that financial advisors were certified as qualified representatives to advise agencies such as the RTA on their derivatives portfolio. So what we're doing here is 2 things. One, we are making sure that our existing policy is updated and meets the requirements. 2, we want to explore what's the best way to proceed forward. As you heard in our meeting, no action was required at that point, but if we want to consider exploring unwinding any of the swaps or in any way modifying them, we would have to have a Dodd-Frank compliant policy. So one of the components, as we talked about, is it was established, I guess the original one in 2002, so it was compliant at the time. The proposed policy incorporates the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act requirements, and also the requirements of the U.S. Commodities Future Trading Commission. The proposed policy is also based on the recommended practice of the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, and the published criteria of the 3 rating agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch Ratings. The policy has also been vetted by both the RTA internal legal counsel and outside counsel. Dinsmore was used. And upon adoption of the policy, we will engage a financial advisor to further review our swap portfolio and follow through on the recommendations that we've looked at. This policy does not allow us to enter into any new swaps. That's not our intent. That would come before the board, but that's not our intent anyway. But we do want to start looking at them. As you know, there's been a trend within the finance community to get out of many of their swaps. Our swap portfolio has done well, but at the same time, you know, they can't stay forever. So we ask that you adopt this policy and that you allow us to start looking at that and exploring that further. Thank you. Are there any questions?
I just have one comment. This program has been very successful since 2002, and the policies amendments make sense. It brings it up to date to the current understanding of the concerns people have with swaps. Are there any questions or comments on this matter? Director Hobson?
Yeah, just one quick comment. This is, I think this policy is very well written, very thorough, very comprehensive. I commend you and Sycamore for putting in a terrific effort. I'm glad that this is in place, so thank you.
And I would be amiss if I didn't give our legal, Nadine and Matt Miller, who were very instrumental in cleaning it up and making sure that we covered all our bases. Thank you.
With no other questions, could we have a motion to approve? Motion by Director DeWitt, second by Director Tarani. Lee for the last unanimous roll call.
7 ayes.
Any other questions or comments for the committee? If not, a motion to adjourn. Motion by Director Buchanan, second by Director Lewis. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Nays? Ayes have it. Committee's adjourned.